Joining me now is Newsweek's Senior Editor-in-Chief and Article 3 Project Senior Counsel, Josh Hammer. Josh, let's start with the media gaslighting we've seen over the past 24 hours after President Joe Biden called half the country garbage. It's on tape. It's clear what he said.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
But many in the media are happy to accept the official White House explanation instead of believing their lying eyes and ears.
Just to clarify, he was not calling Trump supporters garbage. The president wanted to clarify because he understood that what he may have said he understood that what he was saying was being taken out of context.
Josh, he said it. He may regret saying it. Certainly Kamala Harris regrets him saying it. But that requires an apology, not gaslighting the nation.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk a little bit about taking things out of context while we're on the topic, Karine Jean-Pierre, shall we? I mean, how about this notion that Donald Trump was calling for an American bloodbath on day one in office come January 2025, as opposed to what he was actually talking about, which is a bloodbath for Detroit and the American auto industry if Kamala Harris's EV mandates go into place. You want to talk about context, Karine Jean-Pierre. How about Charlottesville, Virginia? The whole fine people on both sides, folks, about the tiki torch neo-Nazi losers, the little dweebs there. Donald Trump did not say that. That was totally taken out of context, 1,000%. Look, we just saw the clip. The viewers here just saw the clip. Joe Biden called half of America garbage. This is actually worse. This is considerably worse, in my opinion, than the infamous Hillary Clinton basket of deplorables gaffe from 8 years ago. I mean, this is a Freudian slip, frankly, if there ever were one. This is what they think of us. They have said it over and over and over again. Joe Biden had a reprehensible speech over our holiday Labor Day weekend in September 2022, the speech that had, dare I say, the Nazi-esque red lighting in the background at Independence Hall in Philadelphia, flanked by U.S. Marines at both sides, saying that MAGA is an existential threat there. They think that we are the threat, not just Donald Trump, all of us. And what I've been calling on my supporters over these past 24 hours to do, Rita, my audience, whatnot there, is to get out there with your vote this Tuesday, November 5th, and prove to them that you are not garbage, rather that you and I and all of us are the actual ones who control our own destiny in this still free United States.
Well, we've got Donald Trump using this saga to create more iconic moments. He was taking the garbage out, not the American people, the Democrat administration. There he is. He said this at a rally in Wisconsin today.
And I have to begin by saying 250 million Americans are not garbage.
I thought we had the last of the iconic moments in this campaign with that McDonald's episode, but now we've got another one. You put this together with the assassination attempt, what he did after that, getting up with the American flag behind him. This campaign is unlike anything we've ever seen.
This whole presidential cycle is unlike anything we've ever seen. I mean, for God knows how many reasons. I mean, the Democrats pulled their horse mid-race. I mean, they pulled a coup right in front of our eyes, swapping out Joe Biden for Kamala Harris. The garbage thing in particular, Donald Trump doing this, utter brilliance. I mean, this is just pure showmanship. This is why Donald Trump, Rita, at this point, is not just a political figure. He is a symbol. He is a tribune of the people. He is a cultural icon. He frankly has been a cultural icon in many ways, especially in New York City circles for 40, 50 years now. I mean, for a very long time. That's part of the reason why he was so politically successful in the first place. But he has a knack for showmanship. The guy was the host of The Apprentice. He knows how to put on a show for the audience. And most important above all, as I wrote in my column after the McDonald's photo op, which you mentioned there, Donald Trump's instincts, his sensibilities, his concerns, his values are not with his fellow billionaires. For a long time now, they have always been with the working people of America. He was actually always a skeptic of globalism going back to the 1990s. He was a supporter of Ross Perot's Reform Party at a time when their skepticism of things like NAFTA was deeply, deeply unpopular with his fellow ultra-millionaires and billionaires in New York City. His sympathies, his sentiments, his sensibilities have always, always been with the forgotten man in America. And ultimately, Rita, I think it is things like this, and it's things like McDonald's, things like that iconic image in Butler, Pennsylvania, that are ultimately going to carry him to a victory this Tuesday.
Now, Josh, we've always known this, but here is confirmation that the FBI knew Hunter Biden's laptop was real. It wasn't Russian disinformation. And the IRS whistleblowers who've come forward, Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler, have told veteran journalist Catherine Hedridge in an interview that the IRS, FBI, and the Department of Justice knew the laptop was not Russian disinformation, and they were banned from investigating it before the 2020 election. Here's just some of that interview.
There was no question in your mind the big guy was Joe Biden.
We corroborated that the big guy was Joe Biden, yes.
We knew that the laptop was real. DOJ knew that the laptop was real.
FBI knew the laptop was real.
There were a lot of overt investigative steps that we were not allowed to take because we had an upcoming election.
When we were doing the interviews, the prosecutors specifically told us that they didn't want to ask about the big guy because they knew it was Joe Biden.
Just incredible to have these bodies, the IRS, Department of Justice, the FBI. We saw all those former intelligence chiefs coming out before the 2020 election and saying this laptop, the contents of it are Russian disinformation. This is election interference, Josh. I can't see it in any other way. They knew how damaging this was for the Biden camp, and they tried to bury it, and they succeeded in burying it and discrediting it completely.
No, they absolutely succeeded in frankly, in doing all of the above. I mean, the way that they took it down from social media was definitely a de facto ban, if nothing else there. So look, what happened with the Hunter Biden New York Post story back in October of 2020 is you had the Biden campaign basically immediately get on the phone with the FBI, get on the phone with Jack Dorsey, who at that time was leading Twitter, with Mark Zuckerberg over at Facebook, Meta, whatever we're calling it these days there. And they immediately were able to get these 51 deep state spooks, people like Brennan and Clapper and all the rest of those folks, to put out this letter saying that it was Russian disinformation. But here is a very important fact, Rita, that a lot of people don't know or don't remember when it comes to that 51 deep state spook letter that came out within 24 to 48 hours. Do you know who the Biden campaign staffer was who was responsible for orchestrating that entire operation? It was a foreign policy staffer by the name of Antony Blinken, who happens to be the current U.S. Secretary of State now, last I checked there. So, I mean, this whole thing has always just stunk from top to bottom. Of course we knew. Of course we knew that the laptop was actually legitimate. We knew it because there was just ample empirical evidence available to anyone who cared to look at that time. The worst thing about this, in my opinion, is that there have never been any consequences for it. Rather, what happened was 2 years, 3 years later, in 2022, 2023, you saw outlets like the New York Times, CBS News, that somewhere like 8, 9 paragraphs into a story, this is what CBS News did. They casually dropped a paragraph deep in the weeds of this lengthy article saying, oh, by the way, the laptop at this point has been acknowledged to be real. No kidding. The federal prosecutors actually invoked it at Hunter Biden's gun trial in Delaware this summer. They used it as evidence. So not only is it not disinformation, now it's evidence for the federal government. I mean, it's just so crazy, unfortunately. But, you know, here in America, whether it comes to the laptop, whether it comes to COVID-19, the Wuhan lab, unfortunately, just the people that really, really, really messed up, we have to get used to the fact that there are not going to be repercussions, unfortunately.
And just a little bit more on that saga. A report by the House Judiciary Committee, it's a subcommittee, revealed that the FBI misled social media giants and how willing the social media giants were to be misled. The likes of Facebook and Twitter at the time, they were quite happy to censor their users, including the New York Post, which had its account suspended. And Josh, Facebook executives even discussed making decisions about censorship to curry favour with what they assumed would be the incoming Biden-Harris administration. They thought there was going to be a change at the White House, and they wanted to be in the good books.
Yeah, well, you know, unfortunately, all of this confirms what many of us immediately suspected at that time. So just to put a little more context on this, because this was a shocking story when it happened, you know, hence we're still talking about it now 4 years later. So this happened, if memory serves, is right around October 15th, October 16th. It was about 2.5 weeks before the 2020 presidential election. The New York Post has this bombshell story. The New York Post, which last I checked was America's fourth largest newspaper in circulation, it was literally founded by Alexander Hamilton, one of our great founding fathers. It has a very rich heritage here. So they put out this story. They were literally, Twitter immediately bans you from posting it or privately sharing it in your DMs, in your private messages. Facebook heavily suppressed it. If you posted it, it would essentially be algorithmically put way, way, way down in your social media feeds there. And yeah, of course they were doing it to curry favor. But one of the most abominable parts of this, and the reason why it is so relevant, is because a rather high percentage of Americans, or at least a non-negligible, a serious percentage of Americans at that time, told pollsters that if they had known the full details of this story, they actually would have changed their vote from Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump. The data that I saw was, I think it was 16% of Hillary Clinton voters, when subsequently informed about this story, said, oh, wow, if I'd known that, I would have voted for Trump. That probably would have tilted the election, Rita. And that is why many of us continue to say that the 2020 election
Biden
had
voters,
glaring deficiencies.
yeah.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a significant percentage who said it would have changed their vote. And when we talk about election interference, that's why we say what happened with that story, that bombshell story, is a clear case of election interference. Josh, do you see any examples of election interference in the current campaign, or are we going to not know about it for a couple of years? Like, do we normally find out when it's too late? I would argue the media trying to rebrand Kamala Harris before our eyes, that you could characterise that as election interference.
You definitely could. In my opinion, the most blatant election interference, though, is the lawfare, is the criminal prosecutions that we are currently seeing against Donald Trump, this unprecedented attempt to incarcerate your political enemy, a former and perhaps future president of the United States. I mean, everything that we have seen here, I mean, Jack Smith, who is the DOJ's alleged special counsel, I say allegedly because he's actually been held to not be a legitimate special counsel, but the alleged special counsel who was prosecuting Donald Trump in both Florida and Washington, D.C., Rita, over the past few weeks, he has been fighting like a madman in Judge Tanya Chutkan's Washington, D.C. courtroom to make sure that his new 165-page January 6th related brief gets out there publicly, which he successfully did. It is out there. It was kind of a nothing burger, actually, and a bit of a letdown. But the reason that he wanted that brief to get out there is because that's their election pitch. Their election pitch on the ballots is that Trump is a fascist, Nazi, Mussolini, Stalin, whatever, and that January 6th was like the worst day in democracy since Pearl Harbor, War of 1812. I don't even know there. You know, and they have so little ability to actually think about what's going on here that they don't realize, I don't think, that what Jack Smith is doing with the lawfare, what the Democrats are doing, is in direct violation of the Department of Justice's own internal justice manual. There's a provision, it's I believe it's 85-9.500, if I have the number correctly there, that specifically says that on the eve of any kind of election, if there is even the perceived public effect of a prosecutorial decision putting a thumb on the scale or tilting the election, a prosecutor shall stand down and shall not do anything. That was actually one of the reasons that Jim Comey back in 2016 said that he would not recommend charges to Hillary Clinton. But apparently what's good for the goose back then is no longer good for the gander when the gander has the identity of Donald Trump.
They are doing everything they can, and they're getting increasingly desperate because the polls have shifted, particularly in those crucial swing states. And just a 10-second answer, if I could. Kamala Harris, should she do Joe Rogan? It looks like she's not going to meet his requirements because he wants her in the studio 3 hours, just like Donald Trump did. And it looks like JD Vance might take the spot.
Honestly, I do not think Kamala Harris should do Joe Rogan. I mean, I cannot imagine her talking for 3 hours, Rita. That seems like a total disaster in the making. If I were her, I would frankly probably skip it. I mean, morally, it's the correct thing to do. He's got a massive platform, but for her own sake, politically, no one wants to see her give these word salads for 3 hours. I mean, really, no one wants to see that.
Josh Hammer, thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you, Rita.